Hi everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Today, we're going to be talking about 10 Batman comic books that you can read under quarantine. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying all the ones on this list, they're either canon or were canon at one time. So they're all part of the main Batman mythos, even if maybe after the edits from Final Crisis and one day later, or excuse me, 1 year later, and New 52 and the Rebirth, even if they were kind of fudged along those lines, that all these stories were part of the original Batman canon at some point. So, like I said, even if they're got a little erased in some of the reboots that DC Comics did, they were still canon. So while you're under quarantine and lockdown and all that good stuff, I thought it would be a good idea to share with you some Batman comics that you can purchase on Amazon or Barnes& and Noble or eBay or somewhere like that. That way you can read them. And hey, maybe you're not a Batman fan, but you're curious about where to start. I've got these tales right here that will be very interesting for you to pick up. Now, all of these are in graphic novel, trade paperback, or hardback format, so you don't have to worry about them being flimsy and whatnot, and they're going to be easy to wipe down if you're nervous about germs. So with that in mind, if you're on Facebook, like this page, turn on all notifications. If you're on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to this channel, turn on all notifications there. You can do that by ringing the bell. YouTube does this weird thing where they curate your subscription feed so you don't see things in chronological order anymore. I don't know why they did that. That really hurts us smaller creators, but they do. In any case, share it out, like the video, and tell all your friends about it. With that in mind, sit back, relax, and welcome to Studio Jake. We are going to jump right in. We're talking about 10 Batman comic books to read while you're on quarantine. And like I said, all of these comics are the ones that I'm listing now are in graphic novel form, trade paperback or hardback, and you can purchase them pretty much anywhere. If you don't want to get a physical copy, most of these you can get on Kindle or a website called Comics Mixology or Comixology, and it's got most of these in digital format. So that's great. And like I said, all of these are comic books and story arcs that were one-time canon. Now, they may have been fudged because of the New 52, Rebirth, Flashpoint eras. So they may not be direct canon, but they were at one time. And that's why I wanted to cover these so you get an idea about kind of the Batman mythology. So first up, we have Batman Year One, which was from 1986 up until the 2000s was Batman's definitive origin. It's written by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Fantastic story. Basically, what it did is it brought Batman out of the 60s. For those of you who don't remember, it basically what happened in the 60s was Batman kind of became a spoof of himself, a parody, and what Year One did was Neil Adams had kind of already started to bring Batman back into being a dark character, not pulp like he was before, but they definitely brought him back into the dark era, and this origin Batman Year One was meant to do that. It's kind of, even though they're still not making Batman necessarily a pulp character, they still drew him more pulpish, and he doesn't fight any sort of supervillain. He's mainly fighting gangster villains, although he does meet Catwoman at one point in the story. It's very interesting, very entertaining, a fantastic, good read. Up next, we have Batman The Long Halloween. This is actually my favorite Batman story. Jeff Loeb did the storyline, Tim Sell did the artwork. And normally, I'm not a huge fan of the style that Tim Sell did for this. I think it's a little too exaggerated. Like the Joker has like this incredibly elongated face and these long teeth, but however, it works for the story. So basically, what happens is it takes place in Batman's early days. Some people have kind of jokingly called it Year Two because they did a comic book called Batman Year Two, but it's not considered. It was not considered canon. It was originally, but then it's not. Although they have made reference to it in DC Rebirth. But anyway, Batman The Long Halloween was kind of considered the actual Year Two, where it's Batman, Harvey Dent, and Lieutenant James Gordon. So he's not Commissioner yet. Harvey Dent isn't Two-Face yet, and there's the serial killer who is murdering the Gotham's criminal elite. And Joker's involved, Riddler's involved, Poison Ivy, Catwoman, pretty much a ton of Batman's main villains have cameos in it. In fact, Christopher Nolan credited Batman The Long Halloween as an influence for The Dark Knight. In fact, he said of it, The Long Halloween is more than a comic book, it's an epic tragedy. He's absolutely right, 100% correct. Highly recommend it. Like I said, this one is my favorite. I love Batman The Long Halloween. Up next, we have The Court of Owls. So this was written by Scott Snyder with Greg Capullo and a couple of other artists because it crossed over with other Batman family members who had solo comics. So it turns out Batman um, discovers uh, a secret society that's been operating in Gotham called the Court of Owls, and he always thought it was an urban legend, but he thinks that they go deeper, that they're slightly connected, and it's 11 issues of the New 52 Batman. So, like I said, during the Scott Snyder era, and it also crossed over with, at the time, Red Hood. He had his own comic. Batgirl had her own comic, Nightwing, and they all cross over as well. Now, I don't know if that's connected with this graphic novel. It may just be focusing on the Bruce Wayne saga of it, but it's really interesting. Batman meets Talon, who became one of his greatest villains, and I think also one of Dick Grayson's greatest villains for a little while. And people seem to think that Batman is just doing this conspiracy theory, that there's really nothing to it, and he could even be losing his grip on his sanity. It's really entertaining, really well written. Scott Snyder is definitely one of the best Batman writers to come out. I'm not a huge fan of some of the newer stuff he's been doing, but when he was writing New 52, wow, what a fantastic story arc in Court of Owls. All right, so next we have Batman Haunted Knight. Now, Haunted Knight is actually a series of one-shots, again, written by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sell, and they basically make it where it shows Batman dealing with some of his worst enemies. So, Joker has a storyline, Mad Hatter has a storyline, Scarecrow has a storyline, and it's just basically him facing them in his early days of being the Dark Knight and being Batman. Um, it's very interesting, very entertaining. I love it. Okay, so this was written in the 80s, or excuse me, 1994. I'm sorry, it was collected as a trade paperback in 1994, but it talks about stuff that happened in the 80s and whatnot. So basically, Batman, this is kind of one of the first times that Batman met someone who was basically his match, and that was the Beast, or KG Beast, if you're fine. Now, for those of you who don't remember, KG Beast is actually in Batman v Superman, although he's not referred to as the Beast, but his identity is mentioned. Um, he's the guy that holds Martha hostage in the Marthaverse Zack Snyder film. That was supposed to be the KG Beast. They didn't mention his code name? I understand if they didn't want to put him on this in his costume. That's fine, whatever. But they could have at least referred to him as the Beast at one point. I don't know. Zack Snyder is such a hack. Anyway, Batman 10 Knights of the Beast. Batman squares off against the Beast, who he's trying to sabotage the American space program and the Star Wars program specifically, I think. And he is a not only a physical match for Batman, but he's also a mental match for Batman, and they have like this showdown. The ending of it was kind of controversial. However, they edited it in the next issue of Batman because it was so controversial. But it's written by Jim Starlin and illustrated by Jim Aparo. Definitely Batman veterans. I mean, those guys have been around and writing Batman mythology um, for a long time. A fantastic part of the Batman story arc. All right, up next we have another Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, which is Batman Dark Victory. This one is a new origin story for Robin. So it bounces, it's a direct sequel. Well, I won't say direct sequel, but it's a sequel to um, it's a sequel to The Long Halloween. And once again, a great story arc, a amazing plot. It definitely brings in some of the forgotten mythology behind Batman. It really expands on Dick Grayson's origin as Robin and how he became Batman's sidekick and a whole lot of other stuff. I mean, a really radical um, change of pace as far as everything involved in the Batman myth. I mean, really, really good stuff. Next up, we have Batman Gothic, which is written by Grant Morrison and drawn by Klaus Janson. Sorry, not Klaus. Klaus Janson. This is this is one that I actually just read recently, but I loved it so much I felt it deserved a shout out. Um, it's a great tale of Batman sort of dealing with a what's the word I'm looking for? With a supernatural enemy that he doesn't quite understand, and it's really fascinating, really interesting. Um, Deals with all kinds of what's the word? Deals with all sorts of themes of abandonment and myth and legend and how Batman is incorporated into these, and also that it connects to Bruce Wayne's origin as a young man and how he developed and went to a private school for a little while and how great his father was. The villain is this man who is a child serial killer. It's very scary and frightening. So definitely not for younger readers, but I highly recommend it for more mature audiences. Really amazing tale. All right, we have another Scott Snyder. This is All-Star Batman. Now, not All-Star Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder, like what Frank Miller wrote, but All-Star Batman. Now this one actually comes in a trilogy of hardcovers. There's volume 2 and 3, and this was a short run that uh, that Scott Snyder did with John Romita Jr. It's very well written. It's very good. It also at one point explores Alfred's origins, and now this is one of the ones where they just came out and say Alfred was a secret agent. There was always rumors that Alfred was some sort of secret agent who was secretly training and helping Batman to become the Dark Knight. Forever, it was always he used his acting, right? He was an actor before he was a butler and everything. That you would usually do that, but in this case, they show his development as as a secret agent and how he used that to help Bruce become the Batman. It's very interesting. Um, Another Jeff Loeb. Now this time he partnered with Jim Lee, but it's the Batman Hush story arc. It is one of the best of the modern villains. It involves the Riddler and Joker and Killer Croc and Clayface and a slew of Batman villains where Hush brings them together to try to take on Batman and to push him over the edge after one of his childhood friends, a guy named Tommy Elliott, gets killed. The twist at the end is shocking. For when I first read it, I never saw it coming. I didn't expect it. Very well written, one of the best of the modern sort of Batman story arcs. Really great stuff by Jeff Loeb. And again, Jim Lee, he's just a master at art. Time will tell how good he'll be running DC Comics, but as far as art goes, great, great. Now, no list would be complete without at least one story arc from Chuck Dixon, and this is Joker's Last Laugh. This story is insanely wild. It's about Joker, where he thinks he's dying, and so he goes nuts, and he's actually not locked up in Blackgate or in Arkham Asylum. He's locked up in another DC Comics prison called the Slab, and it's from there that he concocts um, this this plan with other supervillains to do one last scheme before he passes away, and Batman has to stop him. And once again, um, Chuck Dixon, top of his game, and Scott Beatty helped do the art and everything. Fantastic story arc. Highly recommend it. You'll have to let me know what you think. Those are the 10 Batman graphic novels. Now remember, and comic books that you should read while you're in quarantine. Now remember, I was doing ones that were specific to the canon. They were either canon in the post-crisis continuity or the New 52 DC Rebirth. They were not meant to be non-canon at all. So highly recommend all of those. I'm going to do more non-canon Batman stories maybe later on. Let me know in the comments below if there was one I missed, if there's one that you recommend. Tell me, let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts as well. That's all the time we have for today. You can find me everywhere on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Parler as @RealJacobAiry. YouTube is Studio Jake. Facebook is author Jacob Airy. Find me on my blog at jacobairy.blog, and of course pick up a copy of my novel. You can read that while you're on quarantine. It's The Seven Royals All Good Things. It's a fantasy epic. You're not going to want to miss it. It has a ton of your favorite fairy tale heroes and villains involved in the plot, and I think you are going to get blown away by it. So definitely pick up a copy of it and let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.